start off with me and go right across. Okay, I'm George Kirby, 10th degree black belt, Budoshin Jujitsu, teach in Santa Clarita, California. And next is TJ.
I am TJ Gentry. I'm a pastor in Southern Illinois and martial artist here. I teach out of the church, and I have a Gentry Martial Arts Academy dojo as well, cross-certified in Budoshin. Kung Fu's my mother art, and came to Jiu-Jitsu in the early 90s. So,
okay, Dave.
Dave Clark, outside of Tampa, Florida, in the garden metropolis of nowhere, a little town called Brandon. I am a first degree in a mixture of Shotokan Shidoryu and Shotokai Karate, and I'm fourth degree in Budoshin, and happy to be here this morning working with you guys and learning what I can learn.
Hey, Darren.
Darren Mellering from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I focus on Manami-ryu Jiu-Jitsu and Budoshin Jiu-Jitsu.
Hey, Tyler.
I'm Tyler Garner. I teach in Westminster, Maryland, and happy to be here today.
Hey, Will.
Will Harris. I'm just outside of Baltimore, Maryland. 8th degree in Budoshin and 4th degree in American Combat Jiu-Jitsu.
Okay.
Happy to be back. I haven't been here for a few months. But personal life and schedules have gotten in the way.
We're glad to have you with us. And hopefully we get a couple more people joining us as this progresses. Okay. First question is for today is how do I get local newspapers publicity advertising for my dojo? Anyone want to start with that, or?
There's a few ways you can do it. If you're having some kind of event or big thing, you can do press releases and send them out, and you'll get a mention usually. And if you plan it in advance, you can sometimes get them to show up at the event. Most of these stations have an event calendar you can submit your events to. I've done it a few times, and I've had local TV stations come out to active shooter presentations and women's self-defense seminars and that kind of thing. And then as a result of that, I wind up getting phone calls sometimes after, I live in Baltimore. It's a pretty dangerous city. A lot of things happen here. I end up getting a lot of calls from the reporters to comment on various news events.
Okay. It really depends, I think, a lot on your locale. And what the focus is of the local papers. I usually know who the person is that does community news, because that's the person you go for, the editor for that. And I found, and I learned this from when I started writing books, is you give them more information than what they need, because editors love to edit stuff out. If they have to build your article for you, you're dead meat.
Yeah, I had a 30 interview minute cut down to 2 minutes.
Yeah, but it's they enjoy cutting things out. That's their job. And I'm not putting them down at all, but you have to give them enough stuff to work with. Success rate with newspapers in Santa Clarita is not that great. When I was in Burbank, it was not that much of a problem. But you, as Will said, if we have a special event, it's more likely to end up in the news, and registration is coming up, and the normal stuff. There's another option if you are either a charitable organization, or you run your classes through a community service agency, or someplace like the Y or something like that, and that sometimes you can get free radio advertising. But there is you have to design it so it's short and succinct and to the point. And then they'll probably do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. But sometimes that actually gets on there. And I've never had a reporter or TV station come out for anything that we've done. in 50 years, 55 years. But I guess that's one of the problems when you live in a metropolitan area. There's so much stuff going on that the media can pick and choose what it wants to cover. So usually,
Let's say there's another way to get that. I think what you're referring to with the radio is what they call public service announcements.
yeah, that's it, a public service announcement.
Essays, right. And I've done those for other organizations through the years because I love a microphone. But anyways, I started doing a separate from our regular jiu-jitsu classes on Fridays and Saturdays. I started doing a twice a year art and chaos self-defense open to the general public. Some people from those classes join our regular classes, but most people come and then repeat it 6 months later, free of charge. The class generally attracts somewhere between 16 and as many as 40 people. And it started in 2006. And I just did it every 6 months and enjoyed doing it. And one class in 2015, this lady shows up with her camera, says, "Is it okay if I take some pictures?" I said, "Absolutely. Who are you?" And she introduced herself and said she was a reporter. And at the end of class, she took a bunch of interviews from participants and eventually from me. So what happened was it ended up on the front page of our little local newspaper. And I didn't know it was going to be front page news. I just figured we were really, do what we do. So I get a call from a friend and said, "I looked down in my driveway and there was Dave Clark." And I said, "I'm not, last time I know I wasn't laying in your driveway." And she said, "No, I saw it on the paper." And it was, in Brandon, as small as we are, what she did was make it a front page news article.
It's good. It's you.
So anyways, what I did was I put together a little thing we had put on a tripod in the front of the course, and people come in to sign up and they can read about this. And then later on, Tampa paper picked it up. They put it on the front of another section in the Tampa Tribune. So we have this in another place. And the reason I didn't let you zoom in real quick on that picture is that the picture they got of me, I looked like they caught me in the middle of a word. I look like somebody who's high on drugs. Pretty close. It's a scary picture. Not the one I would have chosen, but hey, it wasn't my choice to edit this thing. Anyways, it's something that was totally unexpected, and I've enjoyed using it to promote. And that's long story short. Will, you mentioned somebody contacting you. As a result of the article, I did get several calls for the following class. People signing up earlier than they normally would have signed up just because they saw the article.
That's great.
Yeah, you think if you can get someone, a media person to come to your event, and they do it on their own volition, and then they decide to do an article, I mean, that is your best path. I mean, you struck gold with that one, Dave.
It's just totally out of the blue. She talked to somebody or read something somewhere, and just showed up.
Yeah, it's just I say the fate of the draw, or whatever you want to call it. And
exactly. Mama
yeah.
Yeah, something similar happened to me. I didn't wind up on the front page of the paper, but someone in one of my courses, I guess they worked for Baltimore Magazine, and then like a few months later, I see a little blurb about our school in this women's issue of Baltimore Magazine, and talking about best self-defense courses, and there I was, and didn't even know it was going to appear until some friends started calling me and said, "Hey, did you see this?" I was like, "No, I didn't."
Yeah.
Well, that's tremendous. I look at something like that and I say, that's a feather in your hat. You're doing a lot of things right when that kind of thing happens.
Right.
Right.
And you can't buy that.
No, no, you can't. I've tried.
So anyway, okay, let's, anybody else have any comments on this, or do we want to move on to
And
something?
the other thing I forgot to mention earlier is if you can know your local officials, like county council members or whatever, they'll come out and they'll put something on their page and you can share that, and other people, sometimes news organizations will pick that up as well. When I moved from one dojo to another, I had our local county council person come out and tour the place, and she brought, of course, our photographer and put a little blurb out about us.
Yeah. Well, any, how do you say, any publicity you can get, good publicity, is good for the dojo and for you. The key is to keep it positive.
Right.
A corollary, it's not a newspaper. I'm in a more rural area, and what used to be the local newspapers have kind of died. And then the regional newspaper has gone from 7 to 4 days. You can imagine that. But what we have found is effective is on certain forms of social media, Facebook, for example, there are some good community groups. Some of them are just gripe groups, but there are some bona fide community groups, and they will, if you prepare a PDF that goes up on Facebook, then they'll share it more broadly. And so it reaches a lot of people, and you control the content. You have to watch the comments sometimes, but we've seen decent response from that as well.
Good. If you could send me a blurb on that, I would really appreciate it, because I'm in spite of all the stuff that somehow is up there on me and on Facebook, I'm fairly inept on Facebook.
Sure, I'll send you something. Yeah, I owe you some articles anyway that I'm working on, so I'll get all that and send it at once.
Because I think what you're saying is very legitimate, that where people go for information is not necessarily the newspaper any longer, but things that are more accessible in the quote unquote technological world, especially younger people. Okay.
Sensei, just to add, I want to add a little bit to those things. I think there was quite a few topics that were mentioned that were great ideas, and Will had mentioned first that that he lives in could be a very questionable, dangerous area, and using that as a topic when the media is constantly broadcasting the negative on what's happening in a community every day. Sometimes they're looking for the good. So when he said add them to your event calendar, and given a topic such as self-defense, like David mentioned, then they like to grab those things because it helps the community, and that's a great attention grabber for people when they're doing those type of articles, instead of just giving the norm every day. Okay, here's the bad stuff that happened in our community, so here's the positive stuff that happened. So a lot of times they'll pick those things up. And congratulations, Dave, that was awesome with the article. So that was good.
Yeah.
We do another thing that I like to use as like an attention grabber is offer what we refer to as a blue line program, which allows any first responder to come into class with no additional, no charges, no fees, no nothing, and until they make at least blue belt, which would be a significant amount of time and involved in the program. And that's another thing that they like to see and grab. And then, yeah, you're correct. The platforms of advertisement these days are more in line with the social media platforms that are out there versus the newspaper. But it's all in all the same thing: one digital format, one paper format. But that's the things that we're doing.
Okay. Anybody
One
else?
thing we have found locally is that the newspaper that I mentioned, our regional, even though it has a very limited print footprint, they have a daily digital, and many times they'll put things on the digital platform that never go to print, but it ends up having a larger readership because of their digital footprint is much bigger. And the accessibility there, they're always looking for content, is much easier. to get into on that as well.
Okay,
And I would say working at a TV station, they're always looking for community outreach programs or something positive, especially for Baltimore City, that is much more positive than the shooting every night or just as a, that's what they like.
okay. Anyone else have any comments on this topic or? Okay, we shall move on to something of greater substance, maybe. Black belt issues. Is there a martial arts or jujitsu culture that students should be exposed to from day one that becomes part of their life or acceptance as they continue to grow in the arts, so that by the time they reach Shodan, they have also achieved a certain level of enculturation? Do we have a responsibility to enculturate our students with a certain perspective or life outlook or be self-behavior or is it something we do through an example, simply by providing a good example of what a black belt should be? Or
I think it's both. We have a mantra in our class when we start and end with it. And then throughout the instructional cycle, I'll talk about different aspects, and the students will always form up and say humility, discipline, respect, and honor. And so those 4 characteristics then become part of what we talk about all the time. So when we do a technique, maybe we're showing a Goshen Waza, and we talk about, well, is there an opportunity here to capitalize on humility? How do we show respect even for the aggressor? What discipline is required? How can we do a technique honorably? Things like that. And what I have found, and I've seen this most in my kids, my personal children who've trained since they were very young, is it's just how they talk about martial arts after being around it for a decade or more. My oldest daughter's 25 and she started training at 3. So for 22 years, she's always talked about that language. And when she teaches now, I'm of course I'm a proud dad, obviously, but I marvel at it, just effortless. She talks like this is all she's ever known, and really it is all she's ever known. And it's not overtly religious. I have students from every faith perspective that I've taught, and everybody can connect with humility, discipline, respect, and honor. So in our instance, I'd say yes, absolutely. We not only have an opportunity, I feel an obligation to do that. I heard a self-defense instructor one time say, I'm teaching martial arts for people who have good ethics, because people who have bad ethics will do bad things with this. And I thought that was really insightful.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? I have, I mean, if you look at my student handbook and whatnot, and not to give Dave another example here of the rule of 3, I have, my 3, I guess, cornerstones are respect, integrity, and humility, and they're all codependent on each other, and it's kind of something that I have followed throughout my life and made part of the, let's say, the philosophy or what I expect to see in my students. And they accept it. And I think if we have, we have to, we as sensei have to exemplify those values that we expect our students to portray. Because there's that old saying, it's not what you say, it's what you do, or whatever. Don't do what I said. What's the phrase? Don't do as I do, do as I say. And that doesn't do as well as do as I do. And or be as I be, or however you want to phrase it. Because as sensei, we have a responsibility, I guess an ethical responsibility to provide a good example for our students. And it's the same as being a good parent, I think. If you provide a good example to your child, hopefully they will follow through and be somewhat like you in terms of their core values. And I think as a parent, that's one of the best things you can hope for, assuming your values are good. So I don't know, and I've seen it, as students that have gone already black, they, as Thomas said, they tend to have absorbed the same values through osmosis or whatever else you want to call it. And it's nice to see that concept continue. Those values continue.
Mhm.
Because if they're continuing, they must have some value. So is there, again, we go back to the question, is there are we expecting a certain amount of enculturation among our students?
I'd say
We do. I think we do, Sensei. We practice that every day, and that's part of, as Sensei, we practice the foundation of the Budo spirit, and that's we teach every single day, and all of those attributes come along with it. And I think that becomes culturalized within an individual. Most of the people that don't believe those things, they tend to they fall away, or they go a different direction. But as we're continuing to practice every day, and when we're talking, even whether it's when we talk about physical technique as being one thing, but when we talk about the belief system and why we're doing the things that we do, and to be honorable with it, then I think then we're talking about the Budo way, and then living in that regard, and that applies to every part of our life.
Okay.
Sensei, to your point, and Darren and I wholeheartedly agree with you. We model that at every moment of every class that we're teaching. To your point on the humility and integrity and respect, I remember as a lower belt studying each of those terms separately to become more familiar with their exact meaning and their full meaning. And somewhere along the path, I realized that you really can't have one without having the other two. That they're beautiful versions of the same thing. I've never met a truly great person who wasn't humble. I've never met a truly great person who wasn't respectful, who didn't demonstrate in their everyday living integrity. And it was an aha to say, that you have one, by definition, you have the other two. And so it felt good, because having looked at them separately, to look at them as an amalgamation, as a singular entity, I just felt warm, felt good. It felt like a deepening of the understanding of each.
Okay. It's your rule of
My rule of one.
three. The triangle. What can I say? You found a triangle. It's your fault.
Maybe it's the eye in the middle of the triangle.
Maybe it's the eye. Those of you who haven't read my epic yet. It's interesting when you put on the internet at times, but anyway. Okay.
And to hit on the culture question, I would say, if you studied marketing at all, you know that every organization has a culture, and it's just a matter of whether or not you consciously cultivate that culture. I was just in a meeting yesterday for my day job. We're going through a brand refresh, and one of the things the marketing guy says is that your reality has to match your perception. You can't be out here selling one thing and then be back here doing something different, because it won't jive with people. And people will recognize that, and no matter what you say, they're going to know, well, that's not the reality. This is what they're really doing, and not come to you. Similar with, I think, with our dojo. I mean, if we preach integrity and respect and all this stuff, but then we're bad mouthing people online and we're doing all these other things that we shouldn't be doing, then I think those schools are gonna suffer. I think just by very nature of laws of attraction, and people are going to be attracted to a certain set of cultures and values. And if it's a match, they'll stick around and they'll stay and they'll promote and continue those same things like we've been talking about. And if they don't, either they or we will work them out of the program. Either they'll take themselves out of it because they're not a match with people, or we'll recognize that this guy's not a match or this person's not a match and start working their way out, making sure they understand that it's maybe not a good fit. They should try another school down the street.
Yeah, I think part of it is that we tend as sensei, we know what we're looking for in a good student. And I'm not talking just the physical aspect, can they do the techniques? But we also feel because of what we're teaching, we are responsible for developing their moral character. We're seeing that their moral character goes in a certain direction. And it's the same thing that applies to a parent, a teacher, a religious leader, anyone who's in a leadership position. It's not only what they can do, but the attitude with which they do it. And I think as sensei, that's a responsibility we all have. But what we teach them in the process, either through our own example or I've met very few martial arts sensei who actually get out there and continually pontificate on how to behave and the correct attitude to have in class. I found the most successful ones are ones that just do it. They provide an example. And
Sensei, a lot of those examples come before class. You're doing setup and you have that banter, and also after class. And I also found that just before COVID, about 4 or 5 years before COVID, during that 4 or 5 year stretch, I had several students who had a hardship getting to and from class. So I was running a shuttle service for those students, and sometimes they only needed to ride to class, but not away, or vice versa. And it occurred to me, I never gave it a second thought. It's just like I just leave early, make it happen, and I get back later. Oh well. But one time, just before COVID, one of my upper belts was out in the parking lot, and he was watching as people were dispersing, and he had some way of saying out loud something about the positive impact of being demonstrated by going the extra mile and getting these people to and from class. I didn't give it a second thought. I like working with these people. They seem to like working with me, and if it just meant the inconvenience of picking up and dropping off, we had conversations, group conversations before and after class because of it. And sometimes it was class related, and sometimes it was life related. But it was another opportunity to be a healthy influence. And I was very aware that anything that was discussed in that vehicle was going to be discussed at their dinner table that night.
yeah, I think you bring up a very important point. Most of in class we can say certain things, you should do this, you should do that, yada yada yada. But before class, after class, or just talking with a student informally and listening to them, which is one of the things we're getting into next, it's that informal interchange where they really pick up on what your values are, and hopefully they will emulate them. But if a student feels comfortable enough to talk with you, then you've accomplished a great deal with them. And this takes us segues right into the next topic, which is sometimes your role as a sensei, teacher, coach, guide, parent, friend, etc., is simply to listen.
If
And
I could speak on the last point before we move on to that,
go ahead.
I would say because we're teaching them things that are more than I guess the average person would probably know after a while, that in itself comes along with things of morality that they have to consider. They could be seen as particularly in court or other areas as someone who could be, that could cause harm or go beyond that mile. They should know how to control themselves. And those come along with morality and the stuff that Dave Will was talking about of humility, integrity, and stuff that should be more seen rather than taught. I mean, they could be taught. I hand out those sheets all the time to students, but they're seen, demonstrated rather than told every class or every belt test or something like that. They're shown, and I think people pick up on that. The bad ones usually leave after a couple belts. They kind of they dwindle off, and then you may have one or two that have just pick on whatever, and then they just leave because they're not getting what they want. They
Right.
see use out of the character that the morality is being taught, either directly or indirectly, is not what they're in for. So some people are it's not for them, which is great because that's how we filter that out.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're not there for they're not there for the morality that they will pick up if they stick around, or the attitude they will pick up. They're there to learn whatever physically there is to teach. And our responsibility as sensei is to teach that, but also the necessity for the use of good judgment in the use of what they're being taught. And that's the hard part, is the moral values or attitudes that go along with the physical aspect. Because it's relatively easy to teach physical techniques, to get the student to understand, can I really walk away from a fight? Or should I? Or if a person swings at me, do I just deflect the block, or do I plant them 6 feet under? And all of these are moral judgments that they have to make. And that's the hard part, is to help them develop as Tyler says, a good sense of judgment. Are we okay on this, Tyler? Or yeah, I mean, and that's the hard part. And I've seen, particularly when I taught junior high at the school, I said I've seen my kids walk away from a fight, which is really hard to do if you're a kid. I had one kid who there were 2 kids who were bad mouthing a teacher behind lockers, and the teacher overheard them, and he came up and pushed one against the locker, and I saw the whole thing go down. So anyway, the teacher then says, "Oh, you want to fight me?" And the kid has his hands up, says, "No, I don't want to fight." And the teacher grabs him by the sleeve and starts walking him down the hallway. And the kid looks at me, because there's a technique where a person's grabbing you by the sleeve, you can come around behind, hook under their elbow. And he looks at me, his hand goes, and I just shook my head, no. He didn't do it. He could have done it, and the guy would have deserved it. But in any case, the teacher then said, "Mr. Kirby, I want you to follow me so these guys can't get away." And I said, "Okay." So anyway, he took him into the office. He went to the principal and said his thing. Then the principal had me come and say, "Okay, Mr. Kirby, what really happened?" Because this guy's reputation was you know, in the dirt anyway. And the kid got off. I mean, you know, he had that happened today, the teacher would have been hit with an assault charge and a whole slew of other things that wouldn't have happened back in the 70s or 80s. But I think, you know, the kid showed really good judgment, which really impressed me. And that's one of the hardest things for us to help our students develop, that good judgment. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tyler.
Speaking of judgment, it just reminds me of the saying that, you know, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment.
Yes, that too, yes.
But you talked about walking away from the fight also. And there's, you know, something we talk about a lot in our school is, you know, not to come back to the rule of three, but the 3-day rule. 3 days from now, if you're lying in the morgue, in the hospital, or behind bars, was it really worth it?
Yeah.
Was that fight worth it? Did you have to do that? Most times, you know, it's not.
Right. You know, so it's a that's a big responsibility for instructors. So I've had students that have come back where they've been in street situations. They're number one, impressed that the technique worked. That surprises them. But their other thing is where the morality comes in, they're upset that they actually hurt the person. They broke his wrist, or shattered his shoulder, or cracked a couple ribs, or person had a concussion, and they're really, they feel bad about hurting the other person, which I guess is a normal human response if you have a good value system. And it just takes some time for listening to them and talking with them, so they get help them get over that hump, so to speak, because they feel if they hurt someone, they did something wrong. And that takes some listening and counseling to get them to accept that what they did was, I say, out of necessity.
Justifiable. I mean, better they get hurt than you. That's the end of the day. That's what we're talking about. At the end of the day, we're talking about you walking away safely. If that means you got to hurt someone who attacks you, so be it. Justifiable. They asked for it, and you didn't go looking for it.
Yeah.
And the value system comes from the culture that we're creating as sensei in the class, and that's where people want. That's why they want more. And whether it's in class or not, out of class, I've been asked to go to dinner after class a lot, and that turned into now on one night a week, half the class wants to go to dinner together after class, just because they want more of that culture, because they want more of that engagement, because they want more of that foundation of understanding beyond just training and understanding, and have that belief system that they feel like they're getting while they're in class, as well as the camaraderie.
Yeah.
So yeah, that whole thing kind of ties in together with everything, I believe.
Well, I think it comes down to, they see that an idea makes sense, and it's socially supported in the dojo, and the sensei who they look up to exemplifies that value. They want to know more. I mean, that's I think a natural human curiosity, because they want to understand. And if there are people around them who believe the same way, that reinforces the value itself.
And the value, as Will was saying, if you're being attacked, what we're doing is being able to learn how to defend yourself so you can be safe. Yeah, the person that they're engaged with may be injured, but that doesn't take away their belief system. And look, I feel bad about it. Look, but again, the ultimate goal is for them to be safe, just like Will said.
Right. Well, that's why and it seems kind of work, but Seki had an attitude, said in jujitsu, you never fight people, you help them. And because they're sick. If they were healthy, they wouldn't attack you. And so if again, it's how do you say, almost a translation of the use their ki to help them go where they want to go. And it's an attitude I try to encourage, because there's nothing wrong with helping people, but sometimes if they swung at you wanted to go in a certain direction and you simply help them get there, it's hard for someone to argue that you fought them. It takes a different mindset, because now you're saying, okay, their ki wanted to go in this direction, therefore you help their ki, their energy flow go in that direction. And that works for some people. And that works as a rationale. Because some people don't want to fight, they don't want to get into fights, and they don't want to hurt another person. So, but you know, it's you as a sensei have a really, we as sensei, not you, we as sensei have a real moral responsibility to help our students understand that, you know, they, with the skills that they have, they also have a responsibility to use them very sparingly, if at all. It's sort of like you can give a person, hey, this is a bad analogy. You can either give a person a gun and say, go have fun, or you can give them a gun and say, you need to be aware of what it can do. They need to see examples of what it can do. They need to be trained in its proper use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they develop a much greater respect for the weapon, which is what you are giving your students, a weapon. And that's a great moral responsibility. And that's why we lose some students, a lot of students along the way. They, as Will has said, and Tyler said, and Darren has said, I think everyone here has said one or another, we lose students because they don't like, in so many words, they don't like our attitude, or we don't have an attitude that agrees with their attitude. However you want to phrase it. Okay. Anything else you want to do with this one, or okay, next one. It's going to be a fun topic. We're actually into 4 topics this time. How do you deal with students, black belts, leaving your dojo to learn another martial art? And then there are 3 subtitles. How do you?
Well, can I go first? I mean, I had one transfer over to me within the AJA, and he asked me directly, can he, can he train in whatever place? I don't even know the place for the instructor, so I was like, I don't, but I gave him, I said, if it helps you along the way with additional information, go for it. I can't stop you from doing anything else. It's good to go out and try different things that can help build on what you may not know or what you want to know more of. So I do encourage it, as long as it's the right group of people they're training with, as long as it's a good place, a friendly place, down to earth, that kind of stuff. It does not really about technique. It's about the instructor, if they're good people, or are they good people? You can kind of judge, you can kind of sense that after a while, if you're there.
Yeah, we've had the same thing. I've had people come from other area dojo, and sometimes it was just a scheduling thing. Like the night we were having class, the schedule fit better for their schedule. But when I knew who they were coming from, I ended up calling that instructor and saying, "Hey, I'm not trying to poach your people. They came to me because my class schedule worked better for them, or whatever the case might have been."
That's the other thing too, is that they may get upset that another student went somewhere else. That happens.
Right. And we've had it all. We've had, going way back, we had a guy join us got his first black belt in Taekwondo, and then joined our jiu-jitsu class. And obviously his punches and kicks were fabulous, but it took him a while to learn the grappling end of things. And at the time, our sensei, I'm trying to remember if he wore I think he let him wear his black belt to class, but then also with the understanding that you're not really a black belt in our style. We're going to recognize your rank, you earned it in your style, but when it comes to jiu-jitsu matters, I think we pegged after a few months, we kind of put him in like somewhere around that brown belt level. And then, as I recall, we tested him a few times, or just moved him up to the point to where he was a black belt, and now he's multiple stripes. And actually, he's in his 70s. I think he stopped training altogether now. But say I'm going way back on that one. But yeah, we've had students come and go and train with different styles, train under different instructors, bring stuff back to class that maybe was a different concept or different way of doing something that we hadn't done before. So it can be beneficial in that way too.
One thing that we have integrated into our development is when someone comes to a Shodan, in order for them to get to Nidan and eventually to Sandan, they have to cross-train. Many of our students, when they achieve Shodan in Jiu-Jitsu, they'll start cross-training in Kung Fu. But the pattern is, by the time you get to second degree in Jiu-Jitsu, you need to be halfway to a black level in some other art. By the time you get to third degree, you have to have earned your first degree in that other art. And what we have found doing that for about 20 years is by the time we get a third degree, they really are two things. They're much more appreciative of the breadth and depth of martial arts, and brand loyalty is not their guiding thought. There's only one way. They've kind of gone away from that. And it usually does really enhance their jiu-jitsu because they have like Kung Fu's a little different approach on things. Doesn't change the jiu-jitsu, but it definitely enriches it. And every student that's gone through that has always come back and said, I'm so glad that I had to get out of just one lane. And it slows them down a little to go to second and third, but the payoff, I think, is tremendous. They become good martial arts citizens, and they're not just saying we're the only ones in the room.
Anyone else? Okay. I've had students come in from other martial arts, and I usually take the approach that I forget who someone said, you can wear your black belt in that art until you earn your first belt here, and then they go to whatever belt they've earned in the dojo. I also tell them they, try our version of things, but as you progress, you're going to end up, because jiu-jitsu is such a wide open martial art anyway, you're going to incorporate the skills you've learned in other arts into jiu-jitsu as well. So just be patient with yourself, and you'll find that a lot of what you already know can be incorporated into traditional jiu-jitsu. And most of them that stick around find, it's a reality as a sensei. You have to accept that there are different ways of doing the same techniques. Where I draw the line is, and it's basically the same way my Seki was. His attitude was, when you enter the dojo, everything you've learned from another martial art stays outside the door. And he was, that's the only thing he allowed. And I do emphasize that, but I've learned over the years that you can't close the door, because they're going to incorporate what they know already anyway. You can't fight. I say, you can guide the rushing waters sometimes, but you can't stop them. the only time, and I've lost a couple of good black belts due to this, is that they've gone off and studied another system of jujitsu and come back and try and teach that system in my classes. And that to me was a real no-no. Along with, changing the names of things and in any event, in those cases, I usually talked with the person a couple, 3 times. And then ultimately in both cases there, I wrote them a letter saying, this is the problem. This is what's happening. It can't continue. You have a choice. And they chose, unfortunately, to leave the dojo. Because they were creating a situation that there was just too much conflict among the students, and we were having too many conflicts in terms of what was being taught and how it was being taught, whether it was appropriate to teach that technique at that belt level or not. All of these are really philosophical issues that really the sensei of a dojo has the last word on. And I'm sure you know that. I hope so. So anyway, that's the issue, and they're 2 different things. It's, if they come to your dojo and they use techniques they've learned elsewhere, that's one thing, and they find they can blend them into what you're teaching. And sometimes I'll even have them teach a technique or teach a class. But a lot of it depends on if they come back after studying another martial art on their attitude towards you and traditional jujitsu. When I studied Katsugo under Harold Brocious, both Seki and Hal knew that I was taking the other classes. And they simply, they said, whatever you learn stops at the door from the other class. And I respected that because I value what both were teaching. And that's a hard thing for many people to do. And that didn't prevent me from mixing the 2 together in my dojo. But and I'm sure we've all done that as well. If we see something from a different martial art that looks really good and works, we say, oh, that's jujitsu. And we incorporate it into our dojo. It just, I think that's, to me, that's one of the niceties of jujitsu, is that it's such an open system that you can, as a sensei, you can look at another martial art and find some aspect of that can be incorporated into what you're teaching, without bastardizing what you have. So
Yeah, I guess it's a fine line to walk there
Yes.
between blending the arts and like trying to change it. Like one of my sensei had a background in Kempo also, so we blended Kempo and Budoshin, and added a lot of strikes and a lot of other things to it that a lot of times you don't see in some strict jiu-jitsu schools. But then at the same time, I can't tell you how many times I've said in class, it's like, what you're doing is not wrong. It's just different. Like, here's what we're teaching. Here's what we're working on. Let's do it. Let's try to do it this way.
Yeah,
what you're doing doesn't work, but it's just different from what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's the key word. It's different, and that's where you, as a sensei, have a responsibility. Is it, can it blend it to traditional jiu-jitsu easily, or is it so different that it requires a different mindset or different approach? And that's where you, as you said, that's where you have to draw the line. And it's it can be a very fine line.
On the flip side, the picture in your background is an example of a student who left our dojo to open his own dojo. Thomas Lander used to train with us up in Baltimore. And then when he moved to Arlington, he opened his own school down there. And I believe that's one of your seminars from Arlington many years ago. just looking at the ages of the folks in the pictures. I know it's not recent.
Oh, it's definitely a decade ago at least. I know that. So,
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's one of the other things we get into later is, how to deal with students who leave your dojo and either with your blessing or without your blessings and start up their own dojo. And I think that's further down the line in terms of our questions.
No, I thought that was the same one. Sorry.
I mean, it works well. I mean, it blends in. We can go there. Where is it here?
that was one of my questions, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Turn this over here. Yeah, I think one of your questions had to do with black belts leaving your dojo. I don't think he specifically said.
Oh yeah, I think I just misread the question.
Pardon?
I think I just misread the question, thought it was in there, but
Yeah,
I misread it. Now I'll read it again.
It's question number 10, and we can go into that one if you want, because it's
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
I think that's Tyler's.
Professor, before you go there, may I bring up one other thing?
Yeah.
So on this, people coming in and they know a way, but it's not the particular way of the school. One of the takeaways from Dave Clark's many useful tools, I forget what you call it, Dave, but you basically have that in the military, what we'd call a sync matrix. It's everything. And it's on the wall and it's the sheets that you have. And so this technique does this, and here's what we're working on. When I first saw that, that really helped me develop the densho for the art that I teach. And I have found, it's not always the case, but most of the time when a student comes in and they not only hear me say we have a curriculum, but here is what we're doing. Here's the densho. There are lots of different ones out there, but this is ours. It's a good reference point to always go back, and it frames. It's like when you give a syllabus to a student in a class. This is what we're doing in this class. Here's the syllabus. Here are the objectives, and so on. I have found that to be really helpful in kind of keeping guardrails on overly introducing different variations.
Yeah, I agree. That's the value of the student handbook.
Yeah,
the black belt handbook. It establishes some boundaries or borders. It all, for what is going to be covered, but it also lets the student know what they're going to eventually learn, and that does make life a lot easier for you, the sensei, and actually for the student, once the student gets the hang of how you're presenting your materials. When I taught school, there were teachers that couldn't understand how I could give a student a packet at the beginning of the semester that covered everything, how to do everything they were going to have to do in my class at the beginning of the year. And I said, I don't want to have to deal with all this explaining stuff for the whole year. And many times kids can, if once they have the material and they know what's expected of them, and they enjoy or they're interested in succeeding, they will go through all the material themselves just so they have a better understanding of what the ultimate goal is. And I think that's the key to having a densho or a syllabus or whatever you want to call it. I don't know the value of my actual densho, which is 800 and some odd techniques and variations, because people have trouble following my notes.
Well, it has two real values. One, it's full of great material, and if you put it all in together, you have a fantastic weapon.
Yeah, but but for the student, it's I refer some people who have purchased it, I say, and they have no experience with jiu-jitsu, I say, you're basically buying this as a collector's item, because I don't know what its real value to them is. Because a person under black belt is under Shodan or Nidan is going to have problems understanding my descriptions, because my descriptions make an assumption that they know a lot of basic core movements. And those core movements are what are covered in the syllabuses and the handbooks and all this other stuff that we provide for our students, or Dave's chart. We have to give them something that they can, I'm trying to think of the term, something they can fathom or get their mind around. And once they get the, but I think that applies to any teacher-student relationship. Once a student gets their mind around something, they can do wonders. Okay, so any other we're getting sidetracked here, which is okay. Since we're dealing with Tyler's, segued into Tyler's question, so to speak, when do you encourage, if you've been in this situation, when do you encourage black belts to move out of your dojo and start their own dojo? Under what conditions would you do that?
None.
Or what concern? Let's rephrase the question. This is an impossible question.
I do see a parallel in what I do in my vocation as a pastor in this regard. Over the years, there have been those who were clearly demonstrating a call to do what I do. And for a while, and maybe this is for a number of years, they are able to sit and participate under my ministry. But at some point, the conversations turned to, if I had been on that particular passage, or if I had been on that topic, I would have done X, Y, Z. And if I hear enough of that, I've said, it's probably time for you to step out and find a church or a place. And I will gladly support you, but you need to go and start doing this on your own, and you're going to develop in a different way. And sometimes those have been terrible decisions, but most of the time it's been good. I haven't seen as many happen on the martial arts side, just because of the number of students and so on. But I think there is a parallel. Students that are moving in the teacher direction, my experience is they start to show certain aptitudes and motivations, and encouraging that can sometimes mean you're encouraging them out the door, not with any animus, but it's better for everybody involved. It's a feel situation in my experience.
Usually what I've done in the past, and this is, if I have if the class is beyond, my class is getting too big in my book, which is anything over 20 is too many. I like to have about 15, 20 students, because I like to be able to give them personal attention. I'll talk with a black belt and say, if I could open up another night in our program, would you be interested in teaching it? And sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no, or they say, let me think about it, and they'll come back to me with either a yes or a no. And usually, because I've worked in community agencies, usually I can pick up another 2-3 nights a week if I want. Now with Santa Clarita, it hasn't. For a while, we were at 2 nights a week, and then enrollment dropped, and we went back down to 1. which is where we are now. But that's an alternative. Sometimes you can have if you have a black belt who's really out there and doing a great job and is showing, ready to leave, can run a classes on their own, that's an alternative. The concern, I think, with having them go someplace else to teach is you're then, some sense they will then look at it commercially and say, if I send this guy out and say, why don't you start your own dojo? You don't want it close enough to your dojo so that it takes students away from your dojo. And that's because to do that is kind of a self-defeating prophecy. Fortunately, I've never had to face that. Although today it really is difficult to get at least in the LA area, which has so many martial arts dojos, and like even Santa Clarita Parks Department, there are they have 6 or 7 different martial arts that they offer, and including, when I first came, their argument was, well, we already have a jiu-jitsu program, why would we want 2? And my response was, well, you've got 3 karate programs, why can't you have 2 jiu-jitsu programs? And it kind of like blew their argument out of the water. And then their next argument, which is something that jiu-jitsu or aikido or jiu-jitsu or aikido, judo, since they have to face is mats. And they said to me, well, we don't have the mats. And I said, well, if I can get the mats, can you find the location? And that took care of all the, if you're starting a dojo someplace, you need to find out what they perceive as the barriers to you doing what you want. And sometimes you can overcome them. And that's a hard thing for new black belts to do, because if they're going to start somewhere, another facility, that facility may not have the equipment so that you can teach. And are you willing to chunk out maybe $2,000 to $3,000 for equipment? Can you afford that? And so, there are a lot of things, and I'm not knocking karate, but karate, they can work on a hard floor. In other parts of the country, jiu-jitsu is taught on a hard floor. But in the US, we like to use mats. So, it's a hard decision for a black belt to make, because, do I want to start in jiu-jitsu? Do I want to start my own dojo? Because there can be a lot of costs involved that they have to be willing to accept.
Sensei,
Yes.
one of the things you said that made sense to me was having somebody come in and teach within the area or dojo that you're actually teaching in. So I do that often, when somebody's ready to offer more classes for our program at that area. So that's one of the things that I always do, and I always encourage it. So if I'm teaching, for example, on a Tuesday or Thursday night, and then we have somebody else that is qualified to teach on another day, time, night, to expand the program, then I do that. And that's been extremely receptive for the people that participate within our class. And then to kind of go back to when would you say to someone, hey, you should go out and have your own program? We also have people that attend class that come in from long distances, an hour and a half, hour, 15 minutes away, just to make class. And I think that once they obtain the level to where they can be effective, be responsible, and then once you make that commitment and you understand that, then I think that is a great time to say, look, it may be a good idea that you could start a program outside of the area, you know, from making that travel, that commute. That doesn't mean that you abandon this class. However, you're at the level to where you can start having your own program and
Right.
start to pursue that. And I think one of the biggest oversights in someone doing that is you know the obvious, right? You know the financial investment that you need to have to get what's necessary to have class, such as the mats. That's one of the biggest things. You need to have mats for what we do. So everybody understands that, they know that, but what the biggest piece that they miss when they want to start a program is their commitment to it, and not commitment that they're going to be there, but commitment to understand that, you know, when you start a class, and then you could even give all the support that you can to it, but when you have an initial opening, there may be, if you bring in, for example, if you take the students from another class, say, you know, we're having a grand opening over here, let's go over there and support it. You might have 10, 15 people participate. However, in the next few classes, there may be 0. You may have 0 people there. And I think that, you know, the person that's starting that program needs to understand you need to continue to be committed to it, and you need to be consistent with it, not only to make class on time, but be at class earlier than what the class time says that you're going to open and start, because you don't know if somebody's coming in and they want to ask questions, if they're going to be there early, and you don't want them to see that there's nobody there, right? Or if you have a start time, say the start time is 6 o'clock, and then nobody's at the class for 6 o'clock, and you're waiting around till 6:15, nobody shows up, and you decide to leave, and then you're not committed to the class either. Whether there's one person that shows up or 0 people show up, you need to be there for the duration of what you say that class time is, or you will never be able to establish yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest oversights, and you know, the commitment to a class outside the final.
I think what you're saying is entirely accurate. I mean, I've had black belts that I've had that have gone off to start their own dojos, have they've started dojos closer to where they live. And I can understand that, you know, why drive 10 or 15 miles or 20 miles when you can drive 2? I think the other thing to bring up in terms of commitment is the hardest thing for them to understand. Like I'm basically, after COVID, starting off brand new with my dojo. I had 10 signups, 11 signups. I've got about 6 people that are there on a regular basis. And you have to, as a sensei, a new sensei has to realize you have to be willing to make the commitment of 1 or 2 years to give your dojo a chance to get off the ground and solid. It's kind of like when I taught economics, and I had kids that would say, I'm going to get out of high school and I'm going to start my own business. And my response was, you know, good. If you break even the first year, you're successful. But you're not going to make any money off of it. By the end of the second year, you should be making some sort of a profit. And they look at me like, huh? And I think the same thing applies to, you know, your black belts, if they're going to go off on their own. You hope, and you need to talk with them about what is their commitment to seeing their dojo succeed. And that takes a lot of patience, because as Darren says, you may have nights that no one will show up when you're starting out. This last Tuesday, it was only 104 out here. And normally, and the building we're in is air conditioned, okay? Normally, most of the students are there by 20 minutes, 30 minutes before classes, help set things up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No one showed up until 5 minutes before class. And I was really concerned no one was going to show up. And I figured, well, I'll stay here till, 7:30 and, see what happens. But they, the committed ones showed up. But I think that's a really serious thing that you need to discuss with the black belt if they're going to go out on their own is they have to recognize this and not let it frustrate them right away.
And the time commitment is a lot more than just the class time and getting there early. It's the marketing, it's the accounting. You gotta do all this stuff. You gotta continue your own training so you're a benefit to your students. It's so much more than just, okay, I want to teach for 3 hours a week.
Right.
That's at least 15 hours of work, 20 hours of work a week.
It depends whether you go to a community agency and they have a facility for you where there's a given clientele, which is going to be easier for you to get going, or whether you're going to make it a commercial venture, which is, I respect anybody who can make it commercially. Because that's, for lack of a better phrase, that's a hell of a lot of hard work.
I can tell you it is. I moved out of the YMCA and at least some commercial space and opened a dojo, moved to a bigger one. Things were going somewhat decently, but I did not count on the capital and the time with COVID hitting and all the restrictions.
Dealing with governmental agencies, having insurance that the property owner is happy with. Advertising, it can be horrendous. And I had one black belt who decided to go private, and I told him, I said, look, before you do anything, go to the Bureau of the Census website. They have all, if you want to put your dojo in a particular area, they have all sorts of information on foot traffic, vehicular traffic, types of businesses that are in your locale, income levels of the people that live around the area of your dojo. All this stuff is out there available for you. And that should be ideally your guide as to where you put your business, based upon what you can afford. He did his own thing and violated every rule in the book, so to speak, and the dojo didn't make it. Very unfortunate, because he was an absolutely excellent instructor. But wherever your venue is really determines how much work it's going to be to get the venue and then have it up to par so that you can have students. When I was first at the Burbank Y, we were relegated to the exercise room, which was the only place that had mats. And two big, what do you call it? What are the bags you hit, the bags that you hit for boxing?
Heavy bag.
Heavy bag. We had two of those right in the middle of all this mat area. And they wouldn't remove them for the class. So we had to work around these two heavy bags as well. It's sometimes your facilities are less than desirable if you're at a community agency, but there are a lot of challenges to being a sensei that most people don't see until it hits them in the face. And
I'm curious, Professor, if I might ask all the folks on here, do you charge, aside from whatever tuition may be being paid, and in some instances there's none, I realize, do you maintain separate testing fees?
I never have.
No.
What we do, because I refuse to nickel dime my students for belts and certificates and test fees and all the other junk, and the city allows it, even it's regardless of whatever community agency I've done, they collect the instructional fee, but we have also always had what's called a materials fee, which pays for their insurance, belts, we don't charge for testing. We don't charge for certificates. I mean, their AJA fee they have to pay. But I can't see, okay, here's, you got to pay $7 or $10 for a belt, or the testing fee is, $20, and the certificate, which is a piece of paper, that's because it has to have the appropriate seals on it. That's another $15. I don't charge a testing fee, but we do have what's called a materials fee. And they are supposed to pay their first night of class, and that's it's actually paid to the dojo.
We don't charge for testing either. The only thing that we do is when there is someone that is eligible for promotion, then pre their eligibility timeline, I always encourage the individual or any practitioner, whatever rank you are, whatever you're moving into next, just make sure that you have your own belt. So what you're going into the next level, and I have them leave that at the dojo with their first and last name on it, date and time that they put it there, and that way when they are eligible, then we can announce that we'll be holding a certain function at a certain day and time, and sometimes they're just pop up as well, but they're on hand at the dojo, but they've already put that there themselves, so there's no additional incurred expense.
Okay.
I don't charge for anything besides, they go out and buy their own gi, and I just give them a website or tell them to go get a judo white gi, and that's it. Everything else, I usually cover AJ dues, the belts, and they just show up and that's it. That's really all I do. I mean, they pay for like a gym fee to come in and monthly or whatever drop-ins. That's the only thing they pay that I don't collect. That's the city. The city collects that, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, for belts, I usually will order 10 to 15 belts at a time. I mean, I have a pretty good idea over the course of a year how many of what belts, what sizes, are going to be needed. And that works out with shipping to maybe, I think, $3 a belt. That's my cost. And because you're going to pay the same shipping, it's not the belt cost, it's the shipping cost today. And the shipping cost for belts is probably going to be about the same for shipping 10 or 15 belts. But so I've got probably in the garage, I've probably got 20, 30 belts sitting there of different colors and sizes. Because
I do that as well. So I'll have some extra belts on hand and gis, but for the individuals, as Tyler was mentioning, I'll help out where I can with it. And one of the ways that I help out is making sure that the dojo has a wholesale account that we can recommend. If somebody wants to order a gi, then I'll certainly order it through the dojo wholesale account. That way it's not costing them any additional money. And then, as you had mentioned, or all of it, I think Tyler had mentioned as well, the AJA dues or fees or organizational dues or fees, I'll let them do that individually. So they can go ahead and register that. Again, not paid to me or anything like that, but they just incur that on their own. And those usually, and that comes with their insurance and so forth.
I mean, because we're a nonprofit organization, if we do have students that are in financial difficulty, we can make adjustments to anything, including the instructional fee that's paid to the city. And on occasion we do that. And usually parents are very, it's easier to do that for kids than it is for adults. The city is more flexible with us when it comes to kids than it is for adults. But I wouldn't want to see a student not being able to be in the class because they simply cannot afford it. And I had a discussion with the mother Tuesday night. She said gis are expensive now. And I think for her son, it'd be, it'd be around 50 some odd dollars for a size 3 gi, judo gi, single weight. And I said, well, that includes the tax and the shipping and everything else. And I said, and that's the only expense you're going to have in terms of equipment. I said, jujitsu is an incredibly inexpensive martial art. If you compare
or sport, you compare it to baseball or dance or any of those kind of activities.
Yeah, I mean, all those other sports are incredibly expensive. And if when your son grows out of that gi, you can probably sell it for almost as much as you paid for it to another student. I said, these things do not wear out, or they do. I mean, it takes a long time. And then they asked, well, will the gi, you know, what happens if the gi is damaged? I said, that's happened once in 55 years. I said, you know, a seam came undone on a judo gi. And I just sent it back to the company. They sent me another one. I mean, I'm not, you know, I said, it's a manufacturer's defect. And they said, okay, we'll send you a new gi to replace it.
Yeah, the only time I've seen one fail is in the adult class. Someone's been wearing the same gi for 12 years.
Yeah.
Just, you know, just wore out.
Yeah. I think wearing a tattered gi is for a sensei to a point is cool. But after a while, I mean, I have a gi that I wear most of the time. I figure in about a year, I'm going to have to replace it because it's wearing thin in a certain couple spots and it's going to develop holes. And frazzled is different from holes. So,
right.
But anyway, these are all the things that a potential sensei has to face. We got to bring this topic to a close. Okay. Let's see. I think we got a couple things we still need to do on that question, but I think we're going to leave. Do we want to deal with is it worth the trade-off of losing an experienced black belt, and how do you fill the void that is left? You've sent a person off to start their own dojo, and usually it's a person you've started to depend on to do certain things. What happens if you've been in that situation?
I've run into a black belt who wanted to do that and was discouraged by his head sensei not to do it, so he stayed instead. So, you know, that's just how that goes.
How long did he stay?
I mean, he's still there. I mean, he's still, you know, but he thought about going out and teaching on his own, and his head sensei said, no, don't do it. So
my initial thought was that he discouraged them. Eventually they're going to leave anyway.
well, no, he stayed. I don't know.
In this case, it didn't happen. I always prefer, like what we were talking about earlier, like, you know, open up another day or night, let them teach their own class at our place.
And that's what I thought was going to happen, but I don't know.
I did have one black belt who, you know, and he's probably the best black belt I've ever had. And he started teaching another night. I had him teaching another night, and then he got into BJJ and MMA and started doing that in the class over Budoshin. And I said, you know, that this is a Budoshin dojo, and if you want to do that, why don't you start your own dojo? I mean, I knew whatever he did, I knew he would succeed. And even though we had that difference, you know, in terms of conflict within my dojo, because another night entirely different things were being taught, he left to open up his own dojo commercially, and he's doing well, and I'm happy for him. You know, I still feel very bad about losing him, because technically he was probably one of the top black belts I've ever had. Extremely knowledgeable, but that's the way life goes. And, I can't fault him for his change of direction. I feel bad about it, but that's my problem.
I'd say something that can happen in these situations. I've got a black belt who started teaching locally, and what's happened is an ongoing rapport where I'll be a guest sensei at his dojo, he'll be a guest sensei at our dojo.
Okay.
Periodically. And so we enjoy team teaching from time to time. If he has a special event, he often invites me. If I have a special event, I often invite him. So we have our separate dojos, but we also work together.
Good.
As brother dojos, so to speak.
Yeah, at some point you got to work on training that next great black belt. You got to have an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. You can't be afraid to let someone go.
And it's always exciting because his students are excited to see me. I bring a different perspective. My students are totally thrilled to see him. He walks in and they break into spontaneous applause because he has gifts I don't have, and it's delightful. I get chill bumps thinking about it. Oh, he's exceptionally fine sensei.
Yeah, well, it's a compliment. It's a compliment to you that happens, and it's also a compliment to you that you don't see it as an insult,
Oh,
but as a
No way.
compliment.
no way. No.
Yeah, but it's like seeing your kid go off and be successful in the world. There's a certain amount of pride there, and that goes back to our original topic, which was the martial arts culture. And so anyway, yeah, I hate losing black belts. I don't like it, but there's a reality, and the ones that have gone off in most cases and started their own dojos have been successful. Anyway, the other question we had left on that topic was, well, we didn't answer, how do you fill the void when you lose a black belt?
Well, I think we'll hit it pretty well. You're gonna have an abundance of usually a couple of people, usually other black belts in the room that may want to take up that other night that they're teaching or want to do something on their own and within the school dojo. That's usually might be the solution.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if you have other black belts, you can do this, yeah. Okay. Do you I don't know if we've hit this question, or do you need to encourage them, or do they make that decision on their own on when to leave, or I think we've hit that question. So, okay. Let's go back here. We've done 1, 2, okay. Our next topic is active shooter training. And
Wow.
you want to say that for next time?
Yes, sir. That's a hard left.
That could be an entire call.
Yeah.
Active shooter. Okay, we're going to leave that for next time, and we'll bring this workshop to a close. I did get an email last night from someone else who is doing a podcast this morning entitled "It's All Jiu-Jitsu." It was a Facebook announcement, and I emailed back to the sensei. I said I'd love to see it, except I mentioned our workshop. So I asked him, I said, and I don't know, I said, is it possible to view the podcast later on Facebook or not? And he hasn't replied yet. I don't know whether that ability is there with Facebook. But anyway.
Yeah, whoever's hosting it should have it available if you miss it live.
Pardon?
Whoever's hosting the podcast should have it available for to watch it on demand.
Yeah, I mean,
live.
I would think so, but we'll see hopefully he'll respond and we'll see what happens. Anyway, want you have a good weekend. One thing I'm going to do is, because I've got some schedule conflicts, is we're going to skip the first Saturday in August. So in August, there'll only be one meeting, which will be on the, I believe, August 20th. So, because I actually have next Saturday, or is it? Yeah, next Saturday, I'm testing someone in Sweden for first brown. And he's actually doing quite well. And then the following, I think the 13th, he's not here. Tom Stanina is going to be interviewing me, Al Gautier, what's his name? He does American Self-Defense. Tony Maynard. He's going to do a comparison of our systems and how they came about. So that's it's the fact that every Saturday is being taken up is causing a crunch for me. So I've got to find some space somewhere. Being retired is a lot of work. So, anyway, so I hope to have this out on YouTube maybe later today or tomorrow. And this will be, I think, number 40. So in any case, and if you have any questions or if you have any topics you'd like to see covered, just send them to me. If you know anyone who you think would gain value from participating in these discussions, you can invite them in, or you can have me invite them, whatever you wish. So, because I think having a variety of people is what makes this interesting, because you get different viewpoints. So anyway,
Would you mind if I a convention that Professor Maynard's holding?
To who? Tony?
Tony Maynard has a convention coming up the end of September in North Carolina. I didn't know if you were aware of it or wanted me to, if it was okay if this was the right format to mention it or not.
Yeah, you can mention it, sure.
Yeah, he's putting an American Combat Jiu-Jitsu convention being hosted by Mickey Heath, who also runs another school down in Mount Airy, North Carolina. So he's going to host it. If you're on Facebook and search American Combat Jiu-Jitsu, it shows up as an event there. I believe it's the last weekend in September.
I think it's September 30th, I think is what it is. I think it's that.
It'll be a Friday night, all day Saturday, Sunday morning kind of deal.
Okay.
I've been to it. This is the first one he's had since COVID. I went to the last one he had pre-COVID, and the number of instructors and information and skill there was incredible.
And I'll just throw that I'm hoping to run a 3-day camp, maybe in July of next year, in Santa Clarita. What I'm hoping to do this time is get some funding from GoFundMe, since we're a 501c3, to hopefully either subsidize travel expenses for some of the participants, or the other option is to bring in some outside instructors and give them some sort of compensation. But our like I said, our greatest expense is renting the facility. So hopefully we can, bring it down to a price that we can help support everyone who comes to participate. So that we start working on that probably in about a month or two, within the month. So just to be aware of that, and you can start saving your money. Because it'd be nice, and then we'll find out if somebody wants to teach stuff, depending on what happens. So if you have any other anyone have any other event coming up they want to publicize?
I wanted to mention,
Notice on.
to Dave Clark. I did email you a couple days ago. I don't know if you check your emails or not.
I do. I don't remember getting it. So,
I'll
yeah,
have to check my, see if I got it right.
okay,
Take a peek at it again.
okay. I'll look forward to, that. If not, I'll attempt to reach you by email.
I'll later after this, I'll get it out.
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Want you guys have a great Saturday afternoon or evening and great rest of the weekend.
Thank you, sir.
May it be cool where you're at, even if it's inside.
Let's be inside for that here.
Yeah.
I appreciate the dry heat out here, and I feel for parts of the country that are up in the hundreds and with high humidity that is just,
Yeah, it's funny. We were in Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and it was low hundreds, but it was so much more comfortable than the 90s and humidity that we're dealing with here.
oh
right
yes,
now.
yeah. The humidity is a killer. Anyway,
Well, Vegas right now, 112, just baking outside.
Yeah. Oh, is that where you are? Oh, you went for the Super Show, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't end up going this year. Had planned to.
okay, take care.
Thank you. Thanks,
Take care, everyone.
See you on the 20th August.
Sounds great. Always learn a lot. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.